Hello, my name is Hassan Sorrells, and this is the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast, episode number 57, with our play today that explores feminism, international relations, the joys of malicious revenge, or the pleasures of malicious revenge, and the old school idea of the dangers of, here's an old school word, miscegenation. And by the way, kids, you're going to want to go to the dictionary to spell that one. William Shakespeare's The Tragedy of Othello, Moor of Venice. Wrapping up our month-long jog through Shakespeare, starting off with Hamlet, continuing through Taming of the Shrew. Of course, we read The Tragedy of King Lear last episode with our guest, Libby Unger. And today we are joined on the podcast by our co-host, returning from episode number 19, where we covered the life and times of Jack Kerouac. I'd like to welcome back my friend and former agitator in Portland, Ryan Stout. What's up, Ryan? How you doing?
Good afternoon, Hassan, and hello, everyone, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So on the video of this, you are going to see Ryan chewing his food. We do record in real time here, and we try to keep it real. Just want to give the audio folks there an opportunity to realize that there's some other things happening back here.
I know that Brad Pitt does it in movies to contribute to the realism.
He does. And we want to contribute it to the realism of the audio here and the video. We don't want to leave people out. So if you're just listening, know that there's a lot of other things going on in this episode that are going to unfold today in front of your waiting ears. And if you're watching on the video, your eyes. So we'll open up from The Tragedy of Othello, the Moor of Venice. We're going to read from Act 1, Scene 1. And just as we did with the version, with the episode that we did with Libby Unger, we're going to be reading from a couple of different editions of Shakespeare here. But primarily, we're going to be reading, as usual, from the Folger Shakespeare Library edition. So we're going to kind of read quite a bit here. And of course, I'm going to do the Shakespearean move of making my voice very dramatic for the purposes of the public reading of the works and the language of Shakespeare. By the way, did see a tweet the other day, which I think is relevant to our conversation here before I get started. Someone tweeted out the King James Version of the Bible is the only thing that's standing as a bulwark against the entire degradation of the English language. And someone else responded to that tweet by saying that and Shakespeare. Act 1, Scene 1. What? Yeah, thank goodness. Thank goodness. Act 1, Scene 1. William Shakespeare's Othello. Enter Roderigo and Iago. Roderigo, tush, never tell me. I take it much unkindly that thou, Iago, who hast my purse, as if the strings were thine, should know of this. Iago, 'sblood, but you'll not hear me. If ever I did dream of such a matter, abhor me. Roderigo, thou toldest me thou didst hold him in thy hate. Iago, despise me if I did not. 3 great ones of this city in personal suit to make me his lieutenant, off-capped to him. And by the faith of man, I know my price. I am worth no worse a place. But he, as loving his own pride and purposes, evades them with a bombast circumstance, horribly stuffed with epithets of war. And in conclusion, none suits my mediators. For certes, says he, I have already chosen my officer. And what was he? Forsooth, a great arithmetician, one Michael Cassio, a Florentine, a fellow almost damned and a fair wife that never set a squadron in the field, nor the division of a battle knows more than a spinster, unless the bookish theoric, wherein the toad consuls can propose as masterly as he. Mere prattle without practice is all his soldiership. But he, sir, had the election, and I, of whom his eyes have seen the proof at Rhodes, at Cyprus, and on other grounds, christened and heathen, must be beleed and calmed by debtor and creditor. This countercaster, he in good time must his lieutenant be, and I, God bless the mark, his moorship's ancient. Rodrigo, by heaven, I rather would have been his hangman. Iago, why, there's no remedy. 'Tis the curse of service. Preferment goes by letter and affection, and not by old gradation, where each second stood heir to the first. Now, sir, be judge yourself, whether I, in any just term, am affined to love the Moor. Rodrigo, I would not follow him then. Iago, oh, sir, content you. I follow him to serve my turn upon him. We cannot all be masters, nor all masters cannot be truly followed. You shall mark many a duteous and knee-crooking knave that, dotting on his own obsequious bondage, wears out his time, much like his master's ass, for naught but provender, and when he's old, cashiered. Quit me such honest knaves. Others there are who, trimmed in forms and visages of duty, keep yet their hearts attending on themselves, and, throwing but shows of service to their lords, do well thrive by them. And when they have lined their coats, do themselves homage. These fellows have some soul, and such a one do I profess myself. For, sir, it is as sure as you are Rodrigo, were I the Moor, I would not be Iago. In following him, I follow but myself. Heaven is my judge, not I, for love and duty, but seemingly so for my peculiar end. For when my outward action doth demonstrate the native act and figure of my heart, in compliment extern, 'tis not long after, but I will wear my heart upon my sleeve for daws to peck at. I am not what I am. Rodrigo, what a full fortune does the thick lips owe, if he can carry it thus. Iago, call up her father, rouse him, make after him, poison his delight, proclaim him in the streets, incense her kinsmen, and though he in a fertile climate dwell, plague him with flies, though that his joy be joy, yet throw such chances of vexation on it as it may lose some color. Rodrigo, here's her father's house, I'll call aloud. Iago, do with like timorous accent and dire yell, as when by night and negligence the fire is spied in populous cities. Rodrigo, Brabantio, Signor Brabantio. Iago, awake! What ho, Brabantio? Thieves, thieves! To your house, your daughter, and your bags! Thieves, thieves! Enter Brabantio above. Brabantio, what is the reason of this terrible summons? What is the matter there? Rodrigo, Signore, is all your family within? Iago, are your doors locked? Brabantio, why, wherefore ask you this? Iago, zounds, sir, you're robbed. For shame, put on your gown. Your heart is burst. You have lost half your soul. Even now, very now, an old black ram is tupping your white ewe. Arise, arise, awake the snorting citizens with the bell, or else the devil will make a grandsire of you. Arise, I say.
Snitches get stitches.
Even now, very now, an old black ram is tupping your white ewe. Well, all right, let's just jump right into it. Why was Iago evil? The late, and in my mind, great Joan Didion, she asked this question, and I want to open up with one of her observations from her great novel, Play It As It Lays, which we covered on the podcast in episode number 46. The very first line put in the mouth of her titular character in Play It As It Lays, Maria, is this one. What makes Iago evil? Some people ask. I never ask. Didion understood something about Iago that most people in our rather more, I don't know if soft is the word, but more careful and politically correct times, Didion understood something about the evil of Iago and what made him evil. It wasn't necessarily just his racism, although that would be, in my mind, the icing on the cake. Iago is evil because he just was. And that doesn't sit well with our modern conception of the psychology of evil or the nature of people. And Ryan, of course, is laughing here because he knows I'm right. Like, we love to say the devil made me do it, or my mama made me do it, or I didn't get enough hugs from my dad, or well, I was just, to paraphrase of Lady Gaga, born this way. But of course, if you don't accept me, then it wasn't that I was born this way, it's that society is evil. We in the West have been caught in between two pitchers on this. We killed God with Nietzsche back in the 1880s. And now we're at a space where we can't even define what evil is. We know it's really, really bad and horrible to shoot one person. But if we go into a school and shoot a bunch of people, we struggle to define that with the appropriate word. And by the way, when people who don't struggle define it with the appropriate word, we kind of stare at them askance, to use Shakespearean language, like a malicious cripple with his hoary eye calling out something. Sometimes a spade is a spade. Sometimes evil is just evil. And leaders have to be aware of this. We have to be able to have the courage to actually name things appropriately and accurately if we are going to lead people. Shakespeare had zero problem calling Iago evil. As a matter of fact, from the first act of Othello, we know he's not good. We know that he's not right. But moderns want to know what makes him evil. What is the root cause? Now, before we can even get into all of that, we have to ask our opening question, which I've asked of literally every guest this month. Why doesn't anyone read Shakespeare anymore? And so to start off today, I'm going to cede the floor to Ryan, and he's going to answer this question, as well as give us his thoughts on what makes Iago evil.
That was beautiful. Across the board, everything. Thank you so much. It's great to be back. It's great to be talking about something I have, some knowledge and experience with.
I'm going to take extensive notes, by the way, on your comments here, because I am curious. We talked about Kerouac in episode 19, and On the Road, and sort of you talked about how you had read On the Road at one point in time in your life, and now reading it another, and it sort of shaped you a little bit differently, and you viewed it differently because of your past experiences. And we can sort of refresh some of the folks on what those experiences are. But this one on evil, racism, miscegenation, warfare, infidelity. I mean, there's so many things here that touch on aspects of your life and experiences that you have had in one way or another. That's why we had to get you back here to talk about this one.
So to answer, to why people don't read Shakespeare anymore, I think Shakespeare could, at times, even that word Shakespeare could be taken out of that question, and people, it's not the first activity that people are looking to do, just in general. And then you throw Shakespeare on top of it, where there is, I believe, some sort of like bell curve in regards to this, how you were describing as far as, life prior to Kerouac, that sort of thing. And then same thing with Shakespeare and how the age and quote unquote wisdom and influenced their perspectives. But Shakespeare, I think probably the easiest or the quickest one is it's hard. It's difficult. People are not nearly as, I don't even know if penmanship is taught in school anymore, vocabulary, the whole, there is a whole, and that's the beautiful thing, is like picking up a Shakespeare play book. It's almost immediately like his ability to connect on a human level is, and also and there's a question later on in this, but his ability, like in like a line or two, you see that Iago and Othello, I mean, he extracts like their history. There's several lines paired in this play where you go, oh wow, those dudes know each other and they have known each other for a very long time.
Right.
And I think to pull that off just in a few lines and to like give you a little insight into the dynamic of their relationship. And I think one of my pushback on the evil is this is, all right, it is hard to, as the Duke says, it's hard. Even his daughter would have fallen for Othello.
That's right. Yes.
So you have this esteemed, educated man who is the representative and the leader of society, at least on the civic end, and saying, "Of course, my daughter would have fallen for as well." And so now you have. So if Othello is that estimable and that insightful and has like, so what was he missing? If Iago is pure evil the entire time, how has this gone completely under or unnoticed? That's kind of like where I push back a little bit on the Shakespearean, because he does everything so convenient and packaged so perfectly. It's like, wait a minute, what was happening before this?
Right.
So that is just kind of, but it leaves the reader to kind of like open and interpret, because there are lines throughout the thing, throughout the play between the two of them that can be, and that's the other beautiful thing of Shakespeare is how many meanings in each line does he have? Sometimes, sometimes it's so I think the first example, and I think it sets an amazing tone for the play and Iago's motives for why he is so evil is this line here. It says, "By heaven, I would rather have been his hangman." Rodrigo says that. And then Iago says, "Why, there is no remedy. 'Tis the curse of service." So when he says there is no remedy, I don't think he's talking about, I think he's talking about the vacuous hole that is in him. I think that's the foreshadowing bit of the play that can easily go under the rug, because he's like, he's just kind of like, and if we're going to say that he's evil and has always been evil, and that it's not a learned behavior through the interactions of Iago and Othello over their storied and rich history, that if evil is just evil for the sake of evil, then how insightful for Iago to say, there's no remedy for this. And this is kind of just getting started, because this is kind of his magnum opus stratagem. It's impressive.
It's well, I mean, there's something that I sometimes will say, in for a penny, in for a pound, Longshanks? And it is this idea, I've taught this to my kids, that if you're going to go all in, what the hell, go all in, and consequences be damned. Like, we're going to go for it. Right. Now, if you are, and I think Iago is to a certain degree. So I like this idea. I'm going to kind of back this up. I like this idea that you have of sort of what or who was Iago before we met him. Right. We live in a world right now where our particularly our superhero entertainment, oh my God, is consumed with the idea of, we can't just accept a character being inserted into a story and we just go. Instead, we have to retell the freaking origin story 10,000 times.
So Iago would have been canceled and it wouldn't have even gotten this far.
Right. Exactly. And so why can't we just, I'm going to push back on the modern narrative idea that, like, who was Iago? And we should wonder who he was before we met him. Why can't we just run across this dude and just be like, he's this dude and let's just go? Why this gets to the idea, and it is something that I've said during the course of a couple of podcast episodes on Shakespeare, we believe that our knowledge should have instrumentality, right? It should be useful for something. Like you were telling me recently about, or a few months ago, conversation we were having about a job opportunity that you had and you were going for training. And I'm not going to get into the specifics of that because I want to protect your thing here. But you were pursuing this job opportunity, you're doing this thing, and you're going to do this training. And the training is only for this job. And when you were talking with me about it, and I know I said this to you and you were kind of like, yeah, okay. But like this, because this is how my brain works, I went, well, that can go into like 8 different things, 8 different, like that's a tool that could be used for 8 different things. And you're like, no. It's only going to be used for this one thing. and that's our modern idea of instrumentality, that if knowledge isn't useful for one thing, then why are we even bothering with it? Well, the offshoot of that is, if I don't know every inch of a person's origin, then I can't possibly just appreciate them for what they are. Like sometimes people are just, a spade is a spade, right? A thing is a thing. And yes, I am saying a spade is a spade on purpose. Yes, I know where that the genesis of that, the origins of that term comes from. I'm saying it on purpose. Like, why can't we just have something just be what it is? Like, I know that frustrates us moderns, but like, why are we just satisfied with that?
Because I think if we were to view something as it is at face value, then as a human being, it's very difficult to see ourselves in that thing. And as humans being ultimately self-centered for purpose of survival, really, if we don't see ourselves or at least some semblance of a reflection in the things and how we view the world, then,
Yeah, but there's 9 billion self-centered people on the planet. Not all of them are in the West. Matter of fact, the vast majority of them are not in the West. And yet somehow non-Western people have they're kind of like, yeah, that thing is just what it is. Like they're kind of okay with that.
It's probably a very similar reason that there's the whole tone scale in Middle Eastern music is larger than it is in Western music, with microtone, and you get different sounds because they hear things that we don't hear. It's like a hummingbird or a dragonfly. A dragonfly sees colors, shapes, and things that are impossible for us to see just because the biology of our eyes don't allow it.
I did not know that about the tone scale in non-Western music.
Yeah. Yeah, they use these different scales. It's pretty fascinating. So there's a band called King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. And they one of their albums, they got together and the whole thing was like, okay, guys, turn your instruments into microtonal instruments. And so the guitarist added all these frets. So there's a ton more tiny frets all over the guitar because there's notes in between. There's a note in between A and A sharp.
Oh wow, okay.
And so
okay.
And yeah, and so this is one of the things that I like to talk about in regard to, like, when this is the topic of conversation, is like, I think of the movie Field of Dreams.
Yeah.
Where the brother of Amy Madigan is like, sell, you gotta sell, you're losing the farm, blah, blah, blah. And at the end, they're playing the game. He walks across the field. He cannot see that the old timers are playing on the Field of Dreams. The daughter falls. She has a hot dog stuck in her throat.
Right.
Burt Lancaster comes over, saves the day.
Yep.
And then he sees all of the people. He sees the baseball players on the field, and he's like, you can't sell this farm, Ray.
Right.
Like, people will come, Ray. And it's like, this is going to sound pretty wild, but like that, Jimmy Butler are like 2 of the examples that I need for myself to know that sometimes in a situation where I feel like I'm the most insane person, actually know what's going on.
Is Iago the most insane person in the tragedy of Othello?
No, I'd say he might be the only one who's true north.
Oh,
And it's not for anyone else's deficiencies. It is the fact that his intentions infect everyone.
I would also say a support to that, not necessarily that I agree with it, but it is support to that, that his motive, not his motives, his motivations, not his motives, his motivations. Those are two different things.
Yeah.
His motivations are probably the purest out of all of the other characters in the play. And our next section kind of reveals a little bit of that, because look, Othello, at least in the first, and of course it's a 5 act structure, the same way it always is in Shakespeare. The first couple of acts are the setup. The back couple of acts are the conclusion. Of course, Act 3 is your denouement. Is where a ton of, actually, Act 3 to Act 4 is where a ton of action begins to happen. And Othello as a character, the Moor, which we're going to talk about coming up here. The Moor has agency in his own destruction. Let me frame it that way. He has a lot of agency in his own destruction. So does Desdemona, by the way. Nobody here comes away clean. Nobody here gets off clean. As the Doors would say, no one gets out of here alive. But Iago seems to have the clearest vision, because his motivation seems to be the most direct. He knows what he wants. Everyone else is playing games.
Othello, so there's the withholding of information is Iago's strongest one of his strongest tactics. Mm-hmm. Because this way it's just with a few words, not everyone would be pinned against each other.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. If people just talked, but people don't talk. Yeah.
And so, one of the a couple more things the comparisons are, so like I thought of when he said don't read Shakespeare anymore. I thought of the Zappa quote, which is "Jazz is dead. It just smells funny."
Okay.
And so there's kind of like that's so it does a couple things. It could be, you could go jazz, like Girl from Ipanema. Mm-hmm. Stan Getz, sing along, still use jazz chords, jazz. It's very jazz inspired influence, and it's sing along. A lot of people know it. It's worked its way into kind of like popular culture, as well as What a Wonderful World by Louis Armstrong. So they're both jazz tunes,
right? But
then there's also Giant Steps, which is John Coltrane's masterpiece, where he abuses their circle of fifths and plays every note in a way that no one else can and or ever will do.
Correct. Right.
And in that regards, I think Shakespeare does both of those things, and that's why he's kind of relatable, because there is something underneath just the superficial. So the people who do read Shakespeare still, and that's why, like, it's so easy to, when we talk and say to read, it's like, because there's a part of me that's starving for that insight that's more than superficial, skin deep. And I think without all of the weird dynamics of the characters in Othello, I don't think Shakespeare pulls that off.
Okay. Well, speaking of weird dynamics, back to Othello, back to the tragedy of Othello, the Moor of Venice. We're going to read a little bit here from Act 1, Scene 3. We're going to pick up where there's been a little bit of a shift. There's going to be some messengers. There's going to be some dukes. There's going to be some senators. There's going to be people who want something from Othello. Act 1, Scene 3. Folger, Shakespeare Library edition of Othello. Enter a messenger. The Ottomites, reverend and gracious, steering with due course toward the island of Rhodes, have there enjointed them with an after fleet. First Senator. So I thought. How many, as you guessed? Messenger. Of 30 sail, and now they do restine their backward course, bearing with frank appearance their purposes toward Cyprus. Signor Montano, your trusty and most valiant servitor, with his free duty recommends you thus, and prays you to believe him. He exits. The Duke. 'Tis certain then for Cyprus. Marcus Lucius, is he not in town? First Senator. He's now in Florence. Duke. Write from us to him. Post haste, dispatch. First Senator. Here comes Brabantio and the valiant Moor. Enter Brabantio, Othello, Cassio, Iago, Rodrigo, and officers. Duke. Valiant Othello, we must straight employ you against the general enemy Ottoman. To Brabantio. I do not see you. Welcome, gentle signor. We lacked your counsel and your help tonight. Brabantio. So did I yours. Good, your grace, pardon me. Neither my place nor aught I heard of businesses hath raised me from my bed, nor doth the general care take hold on me, for my particular grief is of so floodgate and overbearing nature that it engluts and swallows other sorrows, and it is still itself. Duke. Why? What's the matter? Brabantio. My daughter. Oh, my daughter. First Senator. Dead? Brabantio. To me. She is abused, stolen from me and corrupted by spells and medicines, brought of mountebanks for nature so preposterously to err, being not deficient, blind, or lame of sense, sans witchcraft could not. Duke. Whoever he be that in this foul proceeding hath thus beguiled your daughter of herself, and you of her, the bloody book of law ye shall yourself read in the bitter letter, after your own sense, yea, though our proper son stood in your action. Brabantio. Humbly, I thank your grace. Here is the man, this Moor, whom now it seems your special mandate for the state of affairs hath hither brought. All. We are very sorry for it. Duke to Othello. What on your own part can you say for this? Or can you say to this? Brabantio. Nothing, but this is so. Othello. Most potent, grave, and reverend signors, my very noble and approved good masters, that I have taken away this old man's daughter, it is most true. True, I have married her. The very head and front of my offending hath this extent no more. Rude am I in my speech, and little blessed with the soft phrase of peace. For since these arms of mine had 7 years' pith, till now some 9 moons wasted, they have used their dearest action in the tented field. And little of this great world can I speak, more than pertains to feats of broil and battle. And therefore little shall I grace my cause in speaking for myself. Yet by your gracious patience I will a round unvarnished tale deliver of my whole course of love. What drugs, what charms, what conjuration, and what mighty magic, for such proceeding I am charged withal. I won his daughter. I won his daughter. I didn't use witchcraft. I didn't use conjuring. I didn't use root work. I didn't use voodoo. I just showed up and I was competent. I was more competent than all you Italians, all you pale faces. And guess what? I got the girl. Sucks to be you, doesn't it? One of the things that's interesting in the decline of not only English, but also in the decline of the West, and this was something that someone noted on Twitter a few days ago, and I think it's relevant to here, is we have lost the ability, we've lost the desire, we've lost the capability in our language to do the or to perform the poetic clapback. We don't know how to put together the words in such a way where the person feels good, but they also know they kind of sort of got raked over the coals there. And Brabantio knows the dukes, the senators, even Iago is quiet and watching to see how this interaction is going to go. And of course, underneath this interaction, because it is a Moor facing off against all of these Florentine senators and people of power, Iago's waiting to see if the thing that he has plotted is going to be even necessary in the first place, because they might just take care of his problem right then and there. Shakespeare adapted this play from another play, an Italian play called Un Capitano Moro, back in the 1560s. Now, the Moor of Venice was written and performed somewhere around 1605, 1606, somewhere in there, 1607. And so he had knowledge of this play, and it was adapted from that. Shakespeare here plays, particularly in this piece, in Act 1, Scene 3, and on into the next scene, he plays, and into Act 2, he begins to play with the concepts of race in the European conscience. There's a lot of talking about race in America today. And there's been a lot of talk about race in America ever since we became America in 1776. And we haven't really shut up about it ever since. Pace, some attorney generals recently in some presidential administrations who claim we need to have honest conversations about it. We just can't shut up about it. Honest conversations, by the way, just as a side note, typically tend to be conversations where I shut up and listen to your thoughts, but you don't get to shut up and listen to mine. Just going to put that there. And you can do with that what you will. There are limits, however, to having these types of conversations, because at a certain point, race, and we can discuss if that's a social construct or not, Shakespeare clearly believed that there was some sort of social meaning behind it, although I don't know that he would call it a construct. This is a pre-evolutionary text, right? They didn't have Darwinian thought underneath it, right? He didn't have all of the amazing Enlightenment scientific theories that were going to come about, that were going to build the industrial world that we have now. Shakespeare didn't have any access to any of that, but he did have access to his eyes, and he could see how people behaved in relation to the other. And this gets into something that Edward Said, you would talk about, the Turkish writer and social critic. And he talked a lot about the idea of the Arab in European consciousness and how the Arab was set up as the other. And then, of course, he expanded that out into the African being seen as the other. This goes along with things that we talked about in the month of February, where we talked about W.E.B. Du Bois' The Souls of Black Folk. And even he explored this idea of othering in Western consciousness. I think the other thing that Shakespeare is exploring here is the limits of tolerance. And I've said this privately, but now I'm going to say it publicly. I do actually believe fundamentally that the United States of America and the people who live in the United States of America are probably the most tolerant people in the history of the Western world. We've hit the ceiling of tolerance. Particularly on race. You can't get more tolerant than we have gotten. And by the way, we means everybody here, regardless of the shade of your skin color. This is not a white clap back, and this is not a black clap back. This isn't clapping back on people of Native American or Indian descent. No. The reason we got here is because of the creed. The creed that unites all of us in this United States of America. The creed that we had an apocalyptic civil war about to see if it was true. That creed and the civil war we fought to see if it was true have pushed the limits of our tolerance. I think we've probably hit the ceiling. No, not probably. I think we have hit the ceiling. And I think we probably need to move on from that conversation and move into the conversation of how can we be in relationship with each other in a practical fashion.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe even in a utilitarian fashion. I mean, we can always start with that. But the tolerance conversation is pretty much, well, it's pretty much over. But of course, your mileage may vary and you may disagree with me. There's a concept of principles. There's an idea of principles underneath here. And the senators in this bit that we just read are going to they're going to employ Othello. They're going to use his talents and skills to beat the Ottomans, right? They're going to use one other as a tool to beat another other. Sure, Edward Said, if he were still alive, would laugh and laugh and laugh at this. How can leaders live out their stated principles in real life? If it's principles around tolerance, principles around race, principles around conscience, how can they live this out? Because Shakespeare challenges leaders and their principles. He's critiquing the senators, even as he's setting them up to allow the motion of the story, the motion of the play, the motion of the narrative to continue its forward momentum. And of course, Iago is silent here, as sometimes people with clear motivations are when they see the waters getting mucked up. What do we do with all that little section there, Ryan?
So
I loaded up the cart and I just shoved it at you.
yeah, well, I just all right. Let's see. I wrote. All right. So this question number 2: how can leaders live their stated principles in real life? I wrote, pick a real life that meshes and supports your stated principles. So, for instance, if I am married and believe in monogamy, me seeking employment as a prostitute is probably not going. There's going to be some cognitive dissonance in there.
There's going to be
so, and so I think that is, and that's why you said like the utilitarian thing is, it's almost a better place to start. It makes me think of Benjamin Franklin's method to get acquainted with people or to win people's favor was to ask them to do a favor.
Right.
And so people at their core like to be, I think, helpful. That's kind of been my experience, especially in times of tragedy or need or whatever. And so when it's kind of a wonderful way it's a wonderful foundation to build a relationship on if both parties are willing. Is in the utilitarian sense. Now, if you remove that from it, go.
Well, does that wander us over to that whole like thing that I was talking about in the first part when we first started our conversation here about that instrumentality piece? Like, aren't you just using a person as a tool? Which isn't that what these senators and this duke want? They're using Othello as a tool. They're using him as a tool to defeat the Ottomans. They're not really seeing him in all of his humanity. He's not allowed to bring his whole self to work.
That's all right. That's good.
I mean, I see a lot of that on LinkedIn. For people who, quite frankly, if they were in this situation, if they were faced with powerful people who wanted to leverage their tool, their skill sets or their talents in a utilitarian manner to accomplish a goal against other people that happen to visually look like them. I see people posting on LinkedIn very righteous indignation about their principles around this, but I wonder if they protest too much.
The reason I hiccuped right there is because I thought of all of the overthinking that I do on a daily basis. to the point of paralysis. Like, it's a problem. You know me long enough to know that I can overthink a very simple situations and it will blow up in my face. And because I'm so used to it, I'm okay with whatever repercussions and consequences there are. I've become hardened in the sense of that. So it's almost easier to rely on self-sabotage because I know what I'm getting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, conversely, if I were to be, as someone said to me pretty recently, like, bro, you don't need to play life on extra hard. Like, every time you engage, you go, what level? The hardest level, no matter what.
Right.
And so it turns situations like going to the grocery store into a potential nightmare because I'm so preoccupied with this other thing that's of my own creation. And the beautiful thing about the utilitarian kind of utilization of, using someone for a particular skill set is it's clear cut, and you don't really need to kind of like what you're getting. Like, Othello's going to take care of business.
He is going to take care of business. Right. And that, by the way, he does take care of business. Now, he takes care of business, as you would put in a modern film, off screen, because Shakespeare really doesn't care too much about that to show us that, just like he doesn't really care too much to show us, all of Iago's growth from birth until we run into him. And okay, like, he doesn't care about any of that. The same way he doesn't really he looks at it as not really interesting. Right.
Well, yeah, because otherwise it would. Because we have to take the author's word for it that Othello is a badass, and he's been a badass since he was a kid.
Right.
And then you just transfer that over into the characters, and then you get a clear picture of like how they are formed into what they're formed.
Okay, but we can accept this with Othello because, at least nominally, he's the hero. But we can't accept this with Iago.
And so that was it. That was I wasn't contesting that was
okay. Okay.
I was agreeing with you in the sense that those things parallel. Then so what I can't agree with is like, well, it works for one of them, but it doesn't work for the other.
Okay.
And so what kind of how you set up the whole thing was saying, like, you know what, it's William Friedkin, the amazing director,
Exorcist,
French Connection. Benicio del Toro one time was directing some movie, and Benicio said, "What's my motivation?" And he said, "Motivation? I don't give a shit about your motivation." He said, "I want you to act what the words are on the page because this is what the character is doing." And so, when William Friedkin says it like that, you go, "Oh, okay, well, that makes a lot of sense. That makes good sense also." So,
okay, and this idea of and there's been a lot of. So Othello's one of those weird plays, right? Where it's Shakespeare's probably third or fourth most popular tragedy, right? Hamlet leading the pack. I mean, my God, please. And then you've got King Lear after that. Macbeth, right? And King Lear and Macbeth probably flip-flop with each other, although Macbeth probably would come in more than number 2 and King Lear more than number 3. But then Othello kind of trails the pack, right? Because, well, okay, like I was talking about in that whole rant I did about tolerance, right? Like, Othello has agency. It's not like he's weak. Like you said, Othello's a badass. He's been a badass. He's going to keep being a badass, all the way to the tragic end. He's going to be, because that's who he is. And so I wonder if Shakespeare was trying to show Europeans that these are people just like you are. They have the same motivations that you do. They have the same motives and drives that you do. They have the same skill sets that you do. And really, that sort of was like the ceiling of his commentary. Meanwhile, for us here in the year of our Lord 2023 in the West, we've decided that that ceiling isn't good enough. And instead, we need to, I don't know, expand this, push the ceiling up, like pull. I don't know what we're doing. I don't know what we're doing on race. By the way, I'm reading this as a black guy. I don't know what we're doing with here.
So here's okay. So I looked it up. I was like, okay, there's 27 films based on around or whatever Othello.
Yeah.
Okay. The earliest one being 1921.
Yes.
Okay. So it's 27 films. Okay. When was Un Capitan? That was written in 1605, 03.
Un Capitan was written in like 1560 something.
Okay. So now we've got 500 years, right, in between a short story and 27 movies. Mm-hmm. And how many college courses would not exist without this play? This play is responsible for employing probably 50,000 people. So we want to talk about an ability to do something that no one else has been able to, or God knows if even, I mean, it's kind of unprecedented that Shakespeare even exists and it has the length and legs that it does.
Well, that's because it's about human nature. I mean, we talked about this with Hamlet, right? I mean, it's about real human problems. Like you perform Hamlet, you can do Hamlet in Madurai, India. You could do Hamlet in Tokyo, Japan. You could do Hamlet in Dubuque, Iowa. You can do Hamlet in a suburb of Rio de Janeiro and have everybody from the ghetto in Rio de Janeiro come out and watch it, and they will relate there because it's human. It's about human beings, right? Yeah. The tragedy of humanity. Well, guess what? It's the same thing with Othello. You could do Othello in the middle of Africa. You can race reverse everybody. Othello could be a white guy, and it would still work.
So, which also, so this is now, if you look at, so we understand that there's the histories of the characters are, for the purpose of this conversation, kind of irrelevant. They are who they are.
They are who they are.
So now, if they are who they are, and Iago, as you said earlier, there's people who come out of the womb and they're like, I'm a soldier.
Right. Yep.
Iago's I'm a soldier guy. He's been working his entire life. He gets to this thing. He thinks he's going to be christened as a result of his lifelong commitment to military and Othello. Mm-hmm. And now he's being stepped over for a mathematician and somebody who makes origami or whatever. and so as so we got the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying here.
Okay.
So there's one. All right. The alchemy of devotion. It is only through devotion and devotion alone that you will realize the absolute truth. And so, piggybacked on Iago, his devotion to military. And so he does this thing and he gets to the point because he's devoted and he's getting to his truth of I'm this lieutenant, and he gets there and his entire world is non-existent. It is truncated by Othello and nepotism. And so now is Iago evil? It's like I was watching something about Star Wars one time, and the person who did the video essay was like, hey, we look at anyone who attacks America as rebels and they're bad. Star Wars, the rebels are the good guys, but to the bad guys, they're the bad guys. So everyone, you see what I'm saying here?
Okay, so but this is very postmodern of us.
Incredibly.
This is very
because
postmodern.
It's 2023 and Capitano was written in 1597 or whatever. Better be postmodern.
This is very postmodern of us. This is very deconstructing of us, deconstructing the text and in an attempt to discover meaning. And the tragedy with deconstruction, the genuine intellectual and spiritual, and that's where it lands. The genuine intellectual and spiritual tragedy of deconstructionism and postmodernism is you drain meaning from individuals' motivations first, but then fundamentally, when you go all the way, you take that river all the way back to its head. You're draining meaning from their lives. And we're in the middle of a meaning crisis in the West. We are. So you're in the middle of a meaning crisis when there is spiritual disintegration happening. And disintegration literally means what it says, disintegrating, things coming apart, right? Joan Dinian recognized this in the 1960s. That's why she wrote Slouching Towards Bethlehem. She said that the reason she wrote those series of essays was because she had the fundamental idea in going back to San Francisco that her writing didn't matter anymore. It didn't mean anything, because what could she say that was meaningful when the falcon can't hear the falconer and right? Things fall apart, right? Chinua Achebe, talk about things fall apart. Chinua Achebe, we just did a podcast interview, which we'll be releasing in a little bit here, a few episodes down, on Chinua Achebe, the Nigerian novelist who wrote the book Things Fall Apart, which was his direct response to Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, right? Where he thought Conrad othered Africans. And so he was going to write about the African experience from the African experience. And yet and still, you have the tragedy of othering, because he others intentionally on purpose, but he others the white Christian missionaries who come into the village, right, and set up a church, right? And there's a whole thing that happens in part 2 and part 3. I'm not going to get into it. Go read the book. Okay. But if there's no, so the question that I always have for people who take a postmodern approach is this. And this is very literary criticism, and I know this is a leadership podcast. We'll get to leadership in a minute, but it relates here to leadership because postmodernism has infected everything, even leadership.
Yeah.
You can't lead successfully if you don't have meaning. You just can't. And you can't tell me either that my meaning is as good as your meaning. No, we have to make a decision. We have to decide on something. And that's the part of the identity crisis in the West. We can't decide, and so we're disintegrating. To your point about self-sabotage, it's easier to disintegrate than it is to integrate.
Yeah,
because we might have to make a decision and say that this is out and this is in.
And if you blanket statement someone, it unvalidates their history,
right?
And so it's disintegrating the spiritual and the essence that you're talking about as well.
And I'm not saying we're going to solve that problem here. I'm merely pointing it out as this is a fact of our reality now. It doesn't mean that it's right. I'm not attaching emotion to it. It doesn't mean that it's wrong. I'm not attaching emotion to it there. I'm merely saying it is a fact of our reality that we have to deal with. We have to address.
Absolutely. And how I see it in society and personally is, that kind of like postmodern. I mean, it's one step away from nihilism. And so.
Yeah. Well, it came directly out of nihilism. And so
that is, and I went to a show the other day, Sunny Day Real Estate. The lead singer is a guy named Jeremy Enoch. His magnum opus is an album called The Return of the Frog Queen, 97. I'll send it to you. It's amazing. He played with the band, but he ended the show with this kind of like droning drum thing going on, and everyone left, and he was just on the stage, and he did this kind of like free form thing, and he ended with like, "We are not lost. We are not lost. It may feel like we're lost. We are like like." It was kind of like the most beautiful, like self-assured, like thing that you need to, because it feels pretty vacant out here. There's so little to attach to because, and I'll speak for me, my willingness to want to attach to anything because of my past has horrible consequences of forming meaningful present and future relationships.
Well,
so it does, because it becomes this kind of like you were talking about, like the utilitarian thing. Does it and so like I'm in a very like very real moment that's happening right now. Is like I'm working my butt off to move from the feeling of kind of utilitarian separate otherness of society, and I'm trying to like integrate back in. So there is very much
well, and I think we have to do that, because if we don't get we atomized disintegration, and then from that atomized disintegration attaching to race, as in the case of Othello. My racial identity will be the thing that binds me. Okay, maybe. But then you've got other people's racial identities. So good luck with that. And by the way, you can't tell them that they're wrong to attach to their racial identity, although you will. That's the first thing you're going to go to, is that, well, I can attach to my racial identity, but you can't attach to your racial identity. The knife has two sides. I just want to point that out. Or gender identity. We're going to get into this in June on the podcast during the month of Pride. I'm old enough to remember when Pride was still a sin. It was a sign of missing the mark, by the way. Anyway, but attaching to gender or the orientation of your sexual desires, disintegrating and then reintegrating and attaching to that isn't going to bring you more meaning either, because now you're in opposition to other people, right? And now and weirdly enough, we don't wind up in a Rousseauian paradise that we all want to wind up in. We wind up in a Hobbesian nightmare of individuals against other individuals, and we're seeing this right now. A Hobbesian nightmare of individuals against other individuals that's layered on top with this whole piece of, can't we all just get along?
Well, you and I were talking a while back, and I think it was right after that Supreme Court and the abortion. I was talking to you. I walked into a coffee shop, and some woman said to me about burning the government down and this and that. And, I think you said, yeah, great. What are you going to put in its place?
Right. That's always my question.
You can start removing everything. And
right. And then you're done. And then you have anarchy. And again, that's the Hobbesian nightmare of anarchy, right? So we've extended from the tiny seat of Othello out to the nation state of the United States and the social interactions in the nation state. And I want to bring it to the leadership point, right? Because how does the giant challenge for leaders these days is how to lead in an atomized, disintegrated environment where the identity you have as a leader might be the thing that you attach to. But if you're not a leader in every sphere of your life, you're probably only getting a little bit, a tenth of the meaning. Because if you're only leading in 1/10 of one sphere of your life, where's the other 90% going? Where's the other 90% of your meaning going?
Mario Kart. No, I'm being serious.
Yeah. No, you're not wrong. Yeah, the video game industry has exploded. You're not incorrect.
It's a lot of this for me. Well, number one of the things that when I talk about you to other people, one of the things that I cite as most admirable is, as I'm getting older-ish, like energy is a resource. My physical energy is a resource. Mm-hmm. And so I speak about your kind of like temerity and kind of like reckless energy that's focused in a sense, reckless in the sense of like, well, if I don't conjure up some energy right now, my ass is going to be on fire, and maybe my baby's bellies won't be full.
That's
so
true.
like in the most sort of sincere, like healthy way.
Mhm.
And so now we're talking other perspective, leadership, Othello, and it's like, yeah, surrounding yourself with insightful people. And so like Othello, it's like all of the ingredients are there. Othello, a black man, leader, military. Okay, that's shattering a bunch of expectations. Marrying a white Italian woman. Okay, that's shattering. Iago. So all of the figures are in place. And Iago is not doing his part as far as, so you look at checks and balances.
Mhm,
You need
right.
three, you need a three, Othello, he's too close. He can't really count. So he has Desdemona, who is an insightful ear. She's there. She's kind of his partner, their part. And then you have Iago. And then is there anyone else for Othello to lean on in an honest, sincere? So he's never really getting the truth.
That is true. No, there's not. Cassio should have probably been that maybe not Cassio. Rodrigo maybe should have been that. But Rodrigo had his own jealousies, which again, just like pride, we don't like talking about. And I love it. It amuses me to no end, and love in sort of a cynical, sort of bitter way, not in a romantic kind of way. I love it how we can't even say the word of the old school things. I love that. We can't say the word envy. When you say envy, people go, oh, or when you say jealousy, people go, I don't know about that. It's got to be something psychological. Or when you say the word pride, unless it's attached to, I'm proud of my, name your external identity here. You point out that, maybe pride goes before the fall. Oh, please, pitchforks come out. Like people are ready to stab you on Twitter. Like, so, and by the way, I'm not the first person that's happened to. That's happened to other people on Twitter before too. So I got some proof of concept here. Pointing out that, or no, that third person, right, that would have acted as a ballast on him. Like I said, it should have probably been Rodrigo, but he couldn't because he was jealous. He wanted what Othello had, and it wasn't any more complicated or psychological than that.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted what Othello had, and that's jealousy. I mean, I don't know why we got to make this complicated.
Well, so I was talking. So somebody was telling about New York City and how it's impossible to leave New York City. Mm-hmm. And so it was like Colin Quinn maybe, and he's like this buddy he had. He's like, dude, all you do is talk about hating New York. You hate the people. You hate this and blah blah blah. And he's like, why don't you leave? And the guy was just like, the Yankees. So like that was the one thing, and that like humanized the entire So
well, we are a mixture, and Othello shows it perfectly, kind of like King Lear does. We are a mixture of all these different things, right? Nobody's pure, right? So we are driven by I'll use myself. I'm driven by lust and greed and envy and jealousy and pride and arrogance and hubris and covetousness, all of it. I want what other people have. Absolutely, for sure. Right. So is everybody else. And the gap between, I think, good leaders and everyone else is that good leaders, not great, but good leaders realize they're driven by all of these things. And they seek not necessarily maybe to overcome those things. By the way, when you seek to overcome those things, that's how you become great. But they recognize them and they go, okay, these are things that are driving me, and they're self-aware. And here's a big one, honest. I want to talk about lying in a minute. Let's go back to the book. Let's go back to the tragedy of Othello. We got to turn a little bit of a corner here. Want to get into a little bit with Desdemona. Act 2, Scene 1. Vulgar Shakespeare edition. Act 2, Scene 1 of Othello. We're going to start off with, and in the Vulgar Shakespeare Library edition, the stanzas are ordered, which is really great. So you can follow along. So we're going to start off with stanza in the 200 range, and then we're going to move into 300. We're going to read a chunk of Othello here because there's something I want to get to here. Enter Othello in attendance. Othello, oh my fair warrior. Desdemona, my dear Othello. Othello, it gives me wonder great as my contentment, as my content to see you here before me. Oh, my soul's joy. If after every tempest come such calms, may the winds blow till they have wakened to death, and let the laboring bark climb hills of seas, Olympus high, and duck again as low as hells from heaven. If it were now to die, 'twere now to be most happy, for I fear my soul hath her content so absolute that not another comfort like this succeeds in fate, in unknown fate. Desdemona, the heavens forbid, but that our loves and comforts should increase even as our days do grow. Othello, amen to that, sweet powers. I cannot speak enough of this content. It stops me here. It is too much of joy. They kiss. And this, the greatest discords be that ever in our hearts shall make. Iago, aside. Oh, you are well tuned now, but I'll set down the pegs and make this music as honest as I am. Othello, come, let us to the castle. News, friends, our wars are done. The Turks are drowned. How does my old acquaintance of this isle? Honey, you should be well desired in Cyprus. I have found great love amongst them. Oh, my sweet, I pride a lot of fashion, and I dote in mine own comforts. I prithee, good Iago, go to the bay and disembark my coffers. Bring thou the master to the citadel. He is a good one, and his worthiness does challenge much respect. Come, Desdemona, once more, well met at Cyprus. All but Iago and Roderigo exit. Iago to a departing attendant. Do thou meet me presently at the harp. To Roderigo, come hither. If thou beest valiant, as they say, base men being in love have then a nobility in their natures more than is native to them. List me. The lieutenant tonight watches the court of a guard. First, I must tell thee this. Desdemona is directly in love with him. Roderigo, with him? Why, it's just not possible. Iago, lay thy finger thus and let thy soul be instructed. Mark me with what violence she first loved the Moor, but for bragging and telling her fantastical lies. And will she love him still for prating? Let not thy discreet heart think it. Her eye must be fed, and what delight shall she have to look on the devil? When the blood is made dull with the act of sport, there should be, again, to inflame it and to give satiety, a fresh appetite, loveliness and favor, sympathy in years, manners and beauties, all which the Moor is defective in. Now, for want of these required conveniences, her delicate tenderness will find itself abused, begin to heave the gorge, disrelish and abhor the Moor. Very nature will instruct her in it and compel her to some second choice. Now, sir, this granted, as it is a most pregnant and unforced position, who stands so eminent in the degree of this fortune as Cassio does. A knave, very voluble, no further conscionable than putting on the mere form of civil and humane, seeming for the better compassing of his salt and most hidden loose affection. Why none? Why none? A slipper and a subtle knave, a finder of occasions, that has an eye can stamp and counterfeit advantages, though true advantage never presents itself. A devilish knave. Besides, the knave is handsome, young, and hath all those requisites in him that folly and green minds look after. A pestilent, complete knave, and the woman hath found him already. Roderigo, I cannot believe that in her. She's full of most blessed condition. Iago, blessed fig's end. The wine she drinks is made of grapes. She has been blessed. She would have never have loved the Moor. Blessed pudding. Dost thou not see her paddle with the palm of his hand? Dost thou not mark that? Roderigo, yes, that I did, but that was but courtesy. Lechery by this hand, Iago. An index and obscure prologue to the history of lust and foul thoughts. They meet so near with their lips that their breaths embrace together. Villainous thoughts, Roderigo. When these mutualities so marshal the way, hard at hand comes the master and main exercise, the incorporate conclusion. But, sir, be you ruled by me. I have brought you from Venice. Watch you tonight. For the command I'll lay it upon you. Cassio knows you not. I'll not be far from you. Do you find some occasion to anger Cassio, either by speaking too loud, or tainting his discipline, or from what other course you please? which the time shall more favorably minister. Well, Iago, sir, he's rash and very sudden in choler, and haply may strike at you. Provoke him that he may, for even out of that will I cause these of Cyprus to mutiny, whose qualification shall come into no true taste again, but by the displanting of Cassio. So shall you have a shorter journey to your desires, by the means I shall then have to prefer them, and the impediment most profitably removed, without the which there were no expectation of our prosperity. Rodrigo, I will do this, if you can bring it to any opportunity. Iago, I warrant thee, meet me by and by at the citadel. I must fetch his necessaries ashore. Farewell. So in this section, Iago is going to set up Cassio because he is going to tell Rodrigo a lie. And of course, Rodrigo is going to buy it because he wants to buy it. He wants to believe the lie. He wants to believe that Desdemona is merely placating Othello and is merely driven by her lusts, and that Othello is merely enjoying the fruits of wine, enjoying the grapes of wine that have fallen off of the vine, and that Othello is just as distemperate in his heart as Rodrigo is. And of course, Iago, being Iago, sees through everything because, again, his motivations are clear. He wants revenge, and Rodrigo and Cassio are mere tools, talk about instrumentality, to getting to the revenge he seeks.
And blinded by their own.
Oh, yeah. They want to believe.
Yeah. So the ability to have any insight is completely out the window because it's you're winning the lottery.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, who am I to have such luck fall upon me? Ryan was talking about Othello in the context of film. And there's been about 27 films made out of Othello, or 27 film renditions of Othello, depictions of Othello. My personal favorite is Orson Welles in Othello, where Orson Welles played the Moor, which I love. And by the way, there is a tortured production. It took Welles 5 years to make this movie. He had to go away and get money and then come back and refilm parts of it and reshoot parts of it with different actors. It was a mess. And then the editing was a mess. And then later on, Welles's daughter re-edited a version of Othello that genuine Welles auteurs and Welles critics of his films basically said wasn't the right version, but it's the only one you can get now because she controls all the copyright to Welles's estate. It's a whole mess.
Ego boost, huh?
In what way was Orson Welles' daughter evil? I think Orson Welles would probably laugh and smoke a cigarette on that one. He would think that was quite amusing. Othello traditionally, though, on the Elizabethan stage, was done in blackface, which, again, for us moderns, kind of winds us up. The Elizabethans just sort of accepted it. In addition to the fact that on the Elizabethan stage, most of the roles would have been played, as I've said, in both the episode on Hamlet and on King Lear, and in Taming of the Shrew, most of those roles, even the role of Desdemona, would have been played by a young male, typically between the ages of 14 and 18, in blackface playing Othello. Something to think about there. When we think about portraying Othello on both the large screen and the theater stage, and even the small screen, right? Us postmoderns try to go for his quote unquote historical accuracy, but an Arab is not an African. And the Moor and Moorish peoples come directly out of the Arab conquest of Spain between 600 and 1400. And the Arab infiltration of Europe, which, by the way, one of the things that we forget here, being on this continent that we are on in the United States, separated by two giant lakes called the Atlantic and the Pacific, we have the accident of geography of not having to put up really too much with the vagaries of other powers merely pushing on us. The Italians, the Greeks, the Bulgarians, the Hungarians, anybody in Eastern Europe and Southwestern Europe had to deal with and dealt with Arabs all of the time, and had been dealing with them, gosh, for at least 1,500 years, if not more. So an Arab is not necessarily an African, although an African may indeed be an Arab. Morocco, Libya, these weren't places that were exotic and other. If you were in Italy during that time, or even in England, if you were in Europe, these were people that were in your own backyard. They were here quite a bit. So when we portray Othello in blackface, or when Othello is portrayed in blackface, it's not a racist taunt. It's a fact of European conscience. I mean, Shakespeare wouldn't have thought any more about putting a kid from England in blackface to do this play than he would have thought about casting a young man as Desdemona and putting him in a dress.
Well, but is it on par with, like, you go to a play and you're a kid and it's like, oh, it's you just want to. I was a tree in the play.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like you are a prop in this greater thing to express a larger message.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I don't think this gets to the fundamental dynamic between a high school play and a Hollywood film. Mm-hmm. We put more weight of message, or maybe it is we put more weight of responsibility. I think maybe that's probably it. We put more weight of responsibility behind a multi-million-dollar acting effort than we do behind a high school play. I think I could pull off Othello as a high school play, and I don't think it would cause a riot in the least. Matter of fact, I think you could put on Othello as a high school play in South Central Los Angeles, and it would do fine. Or or in inner city Chicago.
Well, that's because of what'd you say earlier? This is as far as tolerance, the racial. Yeah. I mean, most people don't give a shit about, like, honest to God, man. One of the beautiful things about living in Cincinnati is, like, I live downtown. It's backlit, like, it's like being from, like, growing up in Trenton again. It's like, man, it's just there's a lot of black people and there's a lot of white people, and we're all getting along, and we're in it. It is, man. I don't think about it.
Right. Nobody thinks about it.
For the most part, you don't think about it. It's only when you creep out into the suburbs. When I talk to some people, well, the guy who no longer talks to me because I was strategizing, he listened to his perspective on the inner city and blah, blah, that whole thing. And, people, getting closer. Like, whenever someone says they're getting close, I'm like, I don't know if we're talking, dude. I don't know if we're the same.
Well, okay. So I went to a public pool on Saturday. I was at a public pool for 6 hours. Now, unlike Ryan,
your tan's awesome, by the way.
Thank you. Been working on it for a while now. I live adjacent to the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, right? And without getting the specifics of my geography, because you people stay away from me. Anyway, I live adjacent to the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, and I was at a public pool for 6 hours. It doesn't matter why I was at the public pool. I was hanging out, whatever. My daughter was doing some things, whatever. It's cool. And I was observing people having birthday parties right around the pool, this public pool. And it was and by the way, this public pool was in a suburb of the Metroplex, right? And it's a suburb that's considered to be fairly wealthy. It's not the city center, but it's fairly wealthy. But that part of that suburb, because suburbs have gradations of class the same way that anywhere else does, right? Well, at that level, at that public pool, in that particular suburb, it was as multicultural and multiracial as you could possibly imagine. Everybody was there. Literally everybody. And I sat there for 6 hours and I watched everybody streamed. There were 6 birthday parties going on with at least 300 people walking through that sucker. Kids in the pool, people yelling at each other, people shooting water off. There was a person pulling a grill through the pool with barbecue on it while smoking a cigarette. Just sort of leave that visual for you. And you saw what I call, and this is what I do. When I see this, I see the microcosm of America. And again, I have to get back to this. The only reason that works, the only reason it works is because fundamentally we've committed to the creed. We've said that all of that trash that used to matter in other places like Europe or African countries or China. Like if you try to go be Chinese today, the dominant Han Chinese, which are 90% of that country, are going to laugh at you. They just are. You're never going to be Han Chinese. And that matters, by the way, a lot. More so than communism even. It matters. But in America, we've said, if you're going to abandon being Han Chinese, if you're going to abandon being from Madurai, India, if you're going to abandon being from Nairobi, if you're willing to abandon all that and come here, none of that matters. That's genius. That's rare. That's rare in the history of the world because everywhere else it matters. And Shakespeare in Othello is trying to show you just how deep that goes in Iago's thinking.
Well, one of the books that I pulled off the shelf is one of my favorite reference books is The Different Drum, Community and Peacemaking by M. Scott Peck.
Mm-hmm. Heard of this book.
And he talks about there's relevance here. Mm-hmm. He talks about he's working. He just graduated. He's a psychologist. He's in the military. Mm-hmm. I just got out of the military. He's working in the private sector, and he's working at this it's a mental health facility, behavioral health hospital, whatever. And he's getting there. He gets there an hour early every day, leaves an hour late every day. He's working his butt off, sometimes leaves a couple hours late. He's got all these clients going above and beyond and blah, blah, blah. And as time goes on, he's 6 months into it. And he's like, I am the hardest working person here. Mm-hmm. No one else is working as hard as I am. Everyone is walking around and seems to think that that's not that big of a deal, that not that he's working harder, but they're not working as hard. And they're like laughing and almost having fun while working type situation. So he goes to his supervisor and lays all this out and says, I have a problem. And he lays out the whole thing. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. I'm doing this. They're not doing this, blah, blah, blah. And the supervisor says, yes, it's very clear. You have a problem. And I think the person, like you're saying, that's all we talk about in is America, is race. Mm-hmm. It was amazing. Who plays God? Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, Morgan Freeman.
So Morgan Freeman. Interview. Someone's asking about race. Do you remember this quote?
I remember this quote. Yep.
Yeah. And he's like, stop talking about it. We don't care. No one cares. Just get to the next thing, man. And so all of that is leading to, okay, so we have books. We just said that, we have literal books and educational programs, Othello, Shakespeare, all citing out how to live like these righteous lives. Mm-hmm. We have tomes of information in the form of the Bible, in the form of this, in the form of Othello, El Capitan, 615, whatever. And yet we're still here we have all the resources in the world. So what's the linchpin you see, that makes me hate you or you hate me or whatever?
So there's There's a great quote in one of those books you mentioned called the Bible. Great quote from the book of Jeremiah. It says, the heart is deceitful above all else. Who can know it? Now, Jeremiah in his context was talking to Israelites, who was prophesying against them, and was trying to get them who were idol worshiping and had fallen away from the Lord, was trying to warn them that the Babylonians were going to come in and were going to grab them and burn their crops and enslave their children and take them all off to Babylon. And Jeremiah is called the weeping prophet because that is precisely what occurred to the Jews. Even Jeremiah got taken off with all of them to the land of Babylon, proving that a prophet sometimes even gets his own comeuppance from his own mouth. Okay. And he, of course, framed this as God's judgment. We're too sophisticated to believe in that these days. Besides, there is no God. We've replaced him at the top of the pyramid with us, or maybe with nothing.
Dan Bankman-Fried is very real, by the way.
It is. It is. So, but even though we may have kicked eternity or the transcendent off the top of the pyramid, our hearts are still deceitful. I mean, we just saw Rodrigo is willing to be deceived. Cassio is willing to be used. And of course, Iago is deceptive. He knows that the human heart is deceitful. He knows that he can appropriate the human heart. And that's the other thing. There's a lot of talk about cultural appropriation. I wanted to touch on this a little bit. A lot of talk about cultural appropriation in our world today. We shouldn't appropriate that, or we shouldn't say this, or we shouldn't say that because it's appropriating some other race or ethnicity or culture or ethic that's not quote unquote ours.
Is it mimicry? What is it? The best flattery is.
Yeah, basically, what do you call it? It's not mimicry, but basically what you're saying. Yeah, imitation, right? Imitation is the highest form of flattery. Yes. What can leaders do with this, right? Like okay, so I'll use you as an example. You worked in restaurants. Met a chef the other day, and she's doing great work. She's putting together great food. She's doing amazing stuff. We're talking about Anthony Bourdain, which I always talk about Anthony Bourdain with chefs and all that kind of good stuff, because it's the only entree I have into that world. I was a dishwasher for about 5 minutes, and then I moved on to the rest of my life. I didn't hang around. The dishwashing was good enough. I was like, that's good enough. Oh, and I was a waiter for about 3 seconds. Okay. But like in the world of restaurants, there's no more multicultural, shut up about things that don't matter and move on to the things that do matter, which is getting the food out there to the people. There's no more greater environment than that. In the world, the service industry in general, but restaurants in particular. You've had a ton of experience in that space. There's cultural appropriation going on left and right with food, because if there's not, you don't get good food. So how do you navigate, if you're a leader, how do you navigate cultural appropriation?
Well, that's you
because I'd really like to have a drink from, like, I don't know, South America, paired with, like, I don't know, some dessert from Mexico.
Okay,
I like it to be okay.
So you would like a caipirinha?
Yeah,
with the tres leches.
Yeah, sure. There you go. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, there's yeah.
I don't even like tres leches.
You don't. It's so. I think phrasing and terminology is there has to be some sort of like evolution with identifying things as well, because as you said earlier, it's in reference to like leadership, and this is the thing that I have issues with. So someone said something to me the other day, and it was inaccurate, but it wasn't really educational moment. It wasn't really the time. It was just a thing for me to go, okay, you know what? Let me just acknowledge and get on with the rest of my day instead of like, and so I think the same thing with, shattering other people's expectations or perspectives. So, because the people who are going to have kind of like the judgment or something to say are the ones who are going to be kind of like in conflict. So, for instance, I don't necessarily know if I would, because if you swing too much the other way and do a No Child Left Behind, you're left with No Child Left Behind. You're left with the consequences of that.
Right.
And so really meritocracy and valuing characteristics or variables that individuals exemplify, and giving value to that rather than looking at strictly, say, the resume. For instance, on the resume, you ran this kitchen and it was flawless. You did that for 4 years, blah, blah, blah. Then there could be someone else who their greatest asset was their ability to communicate between everyone.
Right.
So you go, okay, there's a couple things. Understanding what other people's assets and strong points are. And if you're a leader, don't set the person up for failure. If there needs to be some sort of shift to put them into a position that is more sort of accommodating to their strong suits than that. Remaining open-minded is an enormous, and I think the best way to remain open-minded is to do things that are uncomfortable. Challenge yourself. If you don't, go to whatever and have this type of food because you don't think you like. I have so many people who come into a restaurant and they're like, "Oh, can you leave the tomato jam off the burger?" It's like, "Oh, do you not like tomato jam?" It's like, "Well, no, I've never had it." It's like, well, there's a chef back there with 20 years experience who puts 35 ingredients and 3 days into making a tomato jam that goes on this burger. And the idea is to substitute ketchup, but you get the tang and the flavor and the sweet and the blah, blah, blah. But you've never had it and you don't like it because it sounds weird. Because it's tomato jam. What the hell is tomato jam? Sounds like jelly. Tomato doesn't belong in jelly. Jelly's for sweet, blah, blah, blah. And then you have that.
Right.
So instead of like open to the idea or possibility that you may not know everything about everything, then you open yourself to an opportunity to learn from the other.
Right. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, and again, I'm not posing or postulating posing the question because I think that there's some weirdly deep answer here. No. I think it is very simple. I think it is just that. I think it's cultures are meant to be grown and preserved, and they are meant to be appropriated. That's the whole point. If the culture you've created has created something good enough that other people want it, why is that a bad thing? Why is that a negative? So I don't particularly have a love in my heart for
Right, Johnstown.
Yeah. I was good. Yeah, sure.
That's the example of where it's harmful. That's the example of a harmful culture.
Well, but you know what? Some people want something from that.
I know. So that's also the thing, because it was very useful and helpful, but I cut you off, so I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Like I'll use here's a perfect example I'll use, a modern one right now. There are, among the smart people, whoever those people are, I see them all over my Twitter feed, right? The smart people have Ukrainian flags in their bios, and all of the retrograde people have Russian flags in their bios or American flags in their bios. Okay. But back in the days when I was drinking more than I am now, I really liked vodka, like a lot. Like I really liked Russian vodka, like a lot. That was a part of their culture, along with Kalashnikovs and crazy Marxists and gulags and all of that.
Yes.
That exactly the eggs, Eastern Orthodox Catholicism. These are things that Russia exported to other parts of the world, right? In some cases brutally, in some cases without other parties' consents, in the case of the whole Marxist communism thing and the Gulag thing, but also with some people's assent, like the Kalashnikovs and the vodka. Mm-hmm. You're going to get something from every culture. I really like vodka. I can take the vodka and I don't have to take the Kalashnikovs. This isn't The Godfather. Actually, no, it is The Godfather. I take the cannolis and I leave the gun. Like mm-hmm. I'm capable of making that critical decision as a leader. You got to trust that I'm aware of the complexities of esoteric neo-colonial decisions in like 1890. And I've made the decision. I've seen it, And Chinua Achebe, by the way, writes about this in his essay that he wrote that was against Heart of Darkness before he published Things Fall Apart. And, he did say, to his credit, some people really like Conrad's writing, and Conrad was a great writer. But I can separate the racism from Conrad, and I don't have to accept the racism, but I can accept everything else. I could take the cannoli of everything else, and I could leave the gun of racism. I can leave that behind. I don't have to take that. That's critical thinking. And when we talk about our cultural appropriation piece, I don't think we articulate that critical piece enough for people. And by the way, we don't critique, we don't say that because we're in a postmodernism leads you to a weird state of absolutism, which is just, nonsense.
Well, I was going to say I agree with you. There's absolutely spot for it to sort of expand on that thought, but how do you even bring that up without sounding like those words of pride and envy that do you know what I mean? Like, mm-hmm. Like how do you even bring that into the conversation? I mean, you and I can, but because we have a long history and we're So
there's a lot of water under the bridge.
And so, but in the same sense of like, how do you, in regards to that, how do you really breach that topic? How do you say, oh, you know what, hey, he's a black, but he says some good things, so I'm going to take his good things. I don't have to necessarily agree with his. I don't even know. See, I don't even. I'm so. You don't know. You don't. I don't. Yeah.
You don't know how to get out of that sentence, but that's what the senators and the Duke are doing when they bring Othello up with Signor Brabatino, right? Who's the father of Desdemona, right? When they bring him up to hire him to go and crush the Ottoman fleet that's pulled into the port that's threatening Florence. That's what they're doing. They're saying, bring over the black. Yeah, we're gonna take him and he's okay.
He's strong.
He's strong. He's got a good brain. Yeah, a good brain. I have good brain. This is what they're doing. And that offends our modern sensibilities because we think you have to, again, you wind up with postmodernism where you wind up disintegrating. You're so disintegrated in your philosophy and in your spirituality and in your intellect that you don't know how. It's a skill set you don't have. You don't know how to just be okay taking the one thing because you're so desperate and hungry, at least in my opinion, you're so desperate and hungry for something that's all encompassing that you can anchor into, which
is that an abstraction of what technology and society has been pushing towards anyway.
I think Charles Bukowski would say it is. I think Bukowski would have said it was for sure. George Carlin, who was right along the line with Bukowski, would say.
So I was just going to say, if we just end the podcast right now, like I'm cool. It's the greatest thing. Eh? Just snippet that, dude. That's all I need.
But I also think that technology has always been doing this to us. So it's just the speed with which it is doing it. So I don't know how much you pay attention to things going on with artificial intelligence and the large language models and all this other kind of the chat GPT stuff, right? Where people are going to use chat GPT to write poetry, and they're going to use chat GPT to write novels, and this is already starting. This is already beginning. Like
I told someone, I was just talking the other day. I was like, he's like, well, what are you doing? To talk about Othello. I'm meeting with my buddy. He's like, what do you need? He goes, I'll get you your summary right now. Right. And he's like, he typed it in, boom, 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 and he goes, and he sent it to me, and it was like a 10-page or 5-page AI generated Othello conversation between you and I.
Right. And that's nice, I guess. But here's the but. And I'm going to paraphrase from some oppositional thinkers in the AI ethics space. There's no mind back there. And that's the last space of human meaning, perhaps even, and probably the space most worth defending. And this is where Bukowski and Carlin, and then on the other side, all of the AI sort of cheerleaders on the other end of that spectrum, both miss the point. Because they're both too far off of the edges to actually understand what's happening in the middle. And the thing that's happening in the middle is the slow motion encroachment on the importance of meaning from the human mind, and that slow motion encroachment comes through technology. Yes, for sure. But it also comes through our anthropomorphization of technology. And for me, from my opinion, that's far more concerning than the technology itself.
So hugging a pillow and thinking it's real,
which is fine when you're 5, by the way.
Yeah,
that's fine when you're 5. I don't care. You're 5. I've talked about my kids a little bit on the podcast. I don't like to put them on blast too much because that's not something they signed up for. But yeah, I mean, I got a little boy, and he's got stuffed animals, and all my kids had stuffed animals, and they all believed the stuffed animals were real. They all had sort of a Velveteen Rabbit kind of experience, and he's having a Velveteen Rabbit type of experience. But he's going to be 7 in January. He's kind of he's approaching the end of the Velveteen Rabbit experience. He's in the last precious moments of that. And then one day, it's just going to be done. And you know what? That's okay. The thing that I tell people who are raising children now is the most important lesson you can teach your child is to understand and to critically examine, pull apart the difference, and understand the gap between what is real and what is not, and be able to clearly and accurately define real, and be able to clearly and accurately define fantasy. So I love Super Mario Kart as much as the next person, but if I build a metaverse world where Super Mario Kart is all I do all day, I'm living in a fantasy. Period. By the way, same thing if I, Pache, to Ryan's experiences here, if I snort a whole bunch of cocaine and go out and have a whole bunch of sex with a whole bunch of hookers, I'm living a fantasy. It may feel more real, but it's still a fantasy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the consequences are real.
Well, and the consequences for me jacking myself into the metaverse all day are also real.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We haven't figured out a way. And this is what worries me about the AI folks and the technology folks. And this is also to your point. They're trying to figure out a way to get us as far away from the consequences, like as they possibly can, like as quick as a dog runs away from its own poop, right? And they can't. And this is the part, this is the hook inside of them. This is the hook inside of all these technologies that's still holding people down. You can't get away from consequences. They don't just magically disappear.
And no matter what you do, some dogs eat their own poop.
And we'll cut that right there. That's the clip that we're going to cut from the podcast. And that will be the ad for the entire episode. Back to the play. Back to the tragedy of Othello.
There's a couple things that I have here in notes that add into the questions.
Yes.
As far as the stated principles, complexities, and really the first question, why no one reads Shakespeare anymore. And so in 15,000 years, we have invented nothing. Picasso is stated to have said when he emerged from the caves of Lascaux.
Yeah, I've read that quote. Yeah,
we've invented pointillism, cubism. The ancient artists knew it all. So there's the aspect of there's kind of like nothing new. It's all been said.
Yeah, there is no new thing under the sun. Yeah.
And another thing that I wanted to talk about in regards to the control of the appetites, and I don't want to get too far ahead, but I think it's kind of related.
Yeah, we're coming up on that. Yeah.
Is Omar Little from The Wire. A man must have a code.
That's right.
And so without the foundation of that code, your sort of mission statement, all those things are not built on firm bedrock. And so if you're not built on firm bedrock, any idea or extrapolation you have from said point is on shaky grounds. And I think that is kind of the dangers of, we talk about technology in advance, because technology advances, there's this chaos, there's a recession to the mean, and then there's a new technology. So there's this sort of like dance that kind of happens. And I think that is going to happen also with AI. Hopefully it will not have too lasting.
I think we're going to get, I'll be honest, I am not nearly as hair on fire, the world is at an end, as Elon Musk is. I'm not nearly to that level. But granted, he's been in rooms with people I haven't been in the rooms with, hearing them talk about crazy stuff that I haven't heard them talk about crazy stuff. And by the way, these are rooms of billionaires that can spend money on the crazy stuff to make the crazy stuff a reality. So I get it. Like, I get why his hair is on fire. Absolutely. I don't know what he knows. I don't see what he's seen. I'm sure if I knew the people he knew and had the conversations that he had, my hair would be on fire too. I'd be in a panic to saying, we need to like really get a hold of this thing. I'd be an AI doomer probably too. I'd probably be worse because of how I'm wired. And yet, one of the things that I note about all the people who are promoting the new technologies that are going to bring us this brave new world, one of the things I note that they all share in common is a fundamental lack of belief in the transcendent. They believe in themselves, don't get me wrong, but they don't even have like a Tibetan Buddhist view of the transcendent. Sure, they may claim to meditate or practice mindfulness or follow the Dalai Lama, but they don't really mean it. They don't live their lives like that. Give me a break. Like one of the key things that I believe you should do if you're actually going to follow that stuff is you should actually probably live like that, right? Otherwise, it's all just, well, I'm going to use another old school word. It's just a bunch of hypocrisy. Now, I'm not quick to call out hypocrites because I've been a hypocrite in my time. That's wisdom. So you got to be careful in using that term. And if you're going to bring me the AI future, this glorious paradise that we're all going to live in, you better have your backyard straight, right? And by the way, Elon isn't claiming that it's going to bring us a paradise. He's claiming it's going to bring us nonsense. And the man has 8 kids by 4 women. His backyard's a mess. So he should probably know something a little bit about that.
Or it could just be an interpretation of how he kind of like, that's how he experiences the world.
Absolutely. It could be that too, right? So maybe it's a thing where, and I talked with somebody, oh gosh, a few months ago about this in the marketing sector. And he was very, very concerned about AI growing a mind. And I said, let it out in the world and let's see what happens. Just let it out. And rather than having a few 100,000 really elite educated people in the West poke at it, how about you let all 9 billion of us poke at it? Let all of us poke at it. Hell, I'll even take the 4 billion people on the planet that are actually on the internet. They're in the global north. Sure, have them poke at it. I think we'll break that thing in about 10 seconds.
Well, in addition to that, okay, so if it's a representation of all of the internet, if it's basically, let's just call it like info god.
Sure.
And
yeah, okay.
If it is an abstraction of every person, or at least anyone who has access to a computer, so then it's an amalgamation of the personalities or the minds of everyone. And for the most part, most people aren't too bright. Most people aren't that interesting. And most people are not very concerned about things that people generally should be concerned about.
Right.
So if that is what we're afraid of, then we're essentially just scared of ourselves.
Right. So just let it out. So you're right. So you're right. You're just approaching it from a different, but you're right. Yeah. Just open the door. I mean, what are we doing? Just let it wander around. Let it wander around. Is somebody gonna hit like go and then everyone's gonna look outside and see a mushroom cloud 10 minutes later? Probably not. But we can hope. You know what I mean? Like it's not. He's hoping for the Walking Dead scenario of disintegration. back to Othello. Let's wrap up. We got to close the loop. We got to wrap up. I got to take my kid to his piano lesson. So let's wrap up. Let's wrap up Othello here. Let's talk a little bit about power. Back to Othello. Back to the Folger Shakespeare Library edition of Othello. Once again, we are back in Act 2. We are in Scene 1, stanzas 310 through 330. We're going to kind of go a little bit through Iago's speech here that he makes after Rodrigo leaves the room, sort of back to where we started off before, because it's a good example of power, jealousy, control, and desire from Iago. That Cassio loves her, I do well believe it. That she loves him, 'tis apt and of great credit. The more, howbeit that I endure him not, is of a constant, loving, noble nature, and I dare think he'll prove to Desdemona a most dear husband. Now I do love her too, not out of absolute lust, though peradventure I stand account for as great a sin. Oh, there's that word. But partly led to diet my revenge, for that I do suspect the lusty Moor hath leaped into my seat, the thought whereof doth like a poisonous mineral gnawed my innards, and nothing can or shall content my soul till I am evened with him, wife for wife, or failing so yet that I put the Moor at least into a jealousy so strong that judgment cannot cure. Which thing to do with this poor trash of Venice, whom I trace for his quick hunting, stand the putting on. I'll have our Michael Cassio on the hip, abuse him to the Moor, and in the rank garb, for I fear Cassio with my nightcap too, make the Moor thank me, love me, and reward me for making him egregiously an ass, and practicing upon his peace and quiet even to madness. 'Tis here, but yet confused. Knavery's plain face is never seen till used. Iago lays out the whole thing right there. I'm going to manipulate everybody. I'm going to turn everybody against everybody. I love her too, but not out of absolute lust, but partly led to diet my revenge, for that I do suspect the lusty Moor hath leaped into my seat. Basically what he's saying there is the Moor's in her bed, and that was actually my spot. Now we get the motive. Now we get the why. Why was Iago evil? Iago was evil because of sexual jealousy, because he wanted to have power. He wanted to have control over people. He wanted to have his lusts fed, even though he claimed he didn't. And of course, he wanted control over the situation and over Othello and Desdemona and anybody else that fell into his sphere. He was just as power hungry and just as driven as even the most venal politician of our time, or of their time. It's really hard to talk about power other than in ways that are sort of pernicious, right? We talk a lot about speaking truth to power, or the injustices of power, or this and that with power. But it's hard to talk about power in the context of dominance and villainy. Iago comes off initially as passive aggressive, but then he goes into this weird sort of turn of control and dominance. We tend to sexualize those types of behaviors, and don't get me wrong, this is a sexual play. There are sexual behaviors and there's sexual lusts that are complicated, that are going on underneath the pieces of this play. We haven't really talked a lot about that today because that's not really the focus of the podcast, but there are those types of dynamics going on, and you can be, and leaders can be, beguiled by their lusts, more so even than just sexual lust for power, lust for money, lust for control. And so Othello stands as a primer, particularly Iago's behavior, on how to not behave if you're a leader. Ryan just said, and he reminded me of The Wire, right? Man must have a code, right? Loved Omar in there. But there's also another moment in The Wire when the old black detective is helping out the young white detective, and the young white detective doesn't understand that every piece matters. When you're putting together a case, every piece matters. No detail can be overlooked. Curbing your base desires requires patience, detail orientation, self-awareness, and a stubborn but not loud insistence on a principle. Othello is going to fall into some problems getting into Act 3 and Act 4. And of course, Desdemona is going to come to a tragic end. And Shakespeare takes the position that Morgan Freeman took in Seven, in the movie Seven. I always think of this moment when he's standing there. I think it's after the first murder that occurs in Seven. Brad Pitt, a very young Brad Pitt, actually, says to Morgan Freeman, "This looks like a crime of passion." He's the young, hot detective. And Morgan Freeman says, "Yeah, look at all that passion all over the walls." How can leaders control their base appetites, Ryan? And how do we stay on the leadership path as we turn the corner here today on the podcast?
Education, doing what you're doing, talking to people, not necessarily even just more so in leadership role. I think just talking, this is going to sound crazy, communicating more, practice. It's just like anything else. The more you practice, I found that I become better at the things that I'm focusing my intent and practice on. One of the byproducts of COVID and the last couple of years I've had have been between depression and the breakup and blah, blah, blah. I've become incredibly isolated, and I've become almost a non-social person. And I'll tell you what, it is obvious because I'm out of practice, because when I go back into certain situations, there are times where I feel fairly naked. Now there's a couple things going on. There's the obvious biological change in my body and this and that, blah, blah, blah. But ultimately it's because I'm one of those words, I'm either I'm either prideful, or I'm stubborn, or I'm all those things, or I'm fearful, or I'm still in a lot of pain, or I'm like, or there's a lot of, but it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And also there's a beautiful scene in Mad Men. Now, who's the squirrely little guy who's always trying to, Joe Campbell or something Campbell. So Campbell is trying, he's coming after Don Draper, and he goes in and he talks to Cooper, and he says, this man is not who he says he is. And he goes into this entire thing. He's like, he lied about this and blah, blah, blah. And what does Cooper say? He says, who cares? Who cares? Who cares what happened to this man prior to his work here at this agency? He's been exemplary and he has carried us. He is an all-star. So this piggybacks to switch from our early on is the proof is in the pudding. Like who cares what this man did in his past, his present? So how, I think it's knowing when to say to Campbell, you know what, that's worthy of exploration. This guy here has done some pretty shady things in the company. We need to examine that. But if he's only behaved in a way that is advantageous and has helped and benefited the group, then maybe there's a little more leniency, but also make note of it. And there's no need to castigate someone for not even crimes, or not even, but just a foggy past. Mm-hmm. Hire people that are smarter than you. Don't be afraid to hire people that are smarter than you. Take personal responsibility and accountability for educating yourself. Mm-hmm. And for, what practices can be done, or what interventions or resources in that moment where I become incredibly closed-minded. Mm-hmm. Is there something that can be intervened? Can a leader put something in place, or have trigger points or something in place to where you get to this crossroad that has historically been difficult? Is the leader insightful enough, and have they done their homework enough to know that the byproduct of not addressing that when it arises is potentially creating an issue that's tenfold worse than the one that's directly in front of you? So it's kind of like taking care of the issues and problems as they arise instead of letting things fester.
Beautiful. And with that, we're going to close the door on this podcast. I want to thank Ryan for coming on. I want to encourage you to stay on the leadership path. Understanding, of course, that curbing your base desires, getting education, maintaining an open mind, understanding that the things of the moment are really, of the moment. That sometimes people are what they are when they show up, and sometimes we have to just deal with them as they are. But occasionally, yes, it is a good idea to investigate and to analyze and to examine the why of who they became and who they will become.
I am not what I am.
But I am not all that I can be. Remember also that the old things, the power, jealousy, control, lust, desires, these things still live in our hearts as human beings. We haven't excised them just because we've gotten a few fancy new tools and we live in healthier environments. The human heart still is a problem. And as leaders, it is our responsibility to lead people from the heart and to recognize our own hearts as well. And with that, I'd like to thank you for listening to Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast. And we're out.
Thank you. Have a beautiful night.
Listen and subscribe to the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast on all the major podcast players that you listen to podcasts on, including iTunes, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and even Spotify. And please leave a 5-star review if you like the show. We need those reviews to grow, and it's the easiest way to make sure that this show gets into the ears of the leaders who need to hear it. And of course, tell all your friends. If you want to get started on the leadership path, HSCT Publishing's products and services can help your team do that. Check out our training webinars, coaching services, and more at leadershiptoolbox.us. We also have a video-based subscription service, that's software as a service, that can help your team become better at the individual level. 60 modules and over 100 hours of video and written content for you at leadingkeys.com. That's leadingkeys.com. We've also got books that will help you and your team grow. Pick up a copy today of My Boss Doesn't Care, 100 essays on disrupting your workplace by disrupting your boss, and subscribe to the Little Red podcast I launched earlier this year with the same name as that little red book. My most recent book is 12 Rules for Leaders, The Foundation of Intentional Leadership, co-written with contributions from Bradley Madigan. This is the book for right now that was written for leaders right now. Pick up a copy by heading over to 12rulesleadersbook.com/now. That's 12rulesleadersbook.com/now. You pay for shipping, and you'll get a copy of my second book as well. Finally, you can get all these books in paperback, hardcover, or as ebooks on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, and any other place online you order books. Finally, HSCT Publishing is on YouTube. Like and subscribe to the video version of the Leadership Lessons for the Great Books podcast on the HSCT Publishing channel on YouTube. Just search for HSCT Publishing and hit the subscribe button. You'll get our weekly video updates, which is the video version of this podcast. And of course, you're going to want to subscribe to my other podcast. That's right, I do more than one. The Hey Sansorels Presents audio experience, where I talk more casually with a broader range of people about all matters that matter in the world today, from arts all the way to analytics. All right, that's it for me.